friends, how are you all doing? My name is Shaz, short for Shahrazad, and I love colorful makeup. Today I have something a little different for us. Because fall equinox just passed, I decided to bring out all of my fall palettes, and I put together 17 palettes in my collection that I have brought out and I want to start using in the fall. This is a combination of old palettes and new palettes. Some might even be discontinued. I looked everything up almost, and I know for a fact that more than half of these are still available and you can still purchase them. But there is a couple here and there that are not going to be available anymore, unfortunately. But I still had them, and I'm sure some of you still have them, so I thought I should feature it just in case you have it and you forgot that you have it and you need a reminder to go dig it out and start using it. Before we get started, as always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Now let's jump right in. Before I get started, I got my spook on. I'm wearing my orange color, which is sort of the fall color. And then obviously also these earrings, although you all are probably going to ask me if I have any other Halloween earrings, and I do. I just don't know where they are. I'm going to find them, and maybe next time I'll promise to wear a different kind of earrings for the spook season. I also have my pumpkin spice or pumpkin allspice candle burning here. Smells so good. Let's jump into the video. Oh, before I jump in, I also use certain criterion for selecting these 17 palettes. I'm going to write the criterion in the description box below so that this video doesn't get super long. Also, for whoever sticks around till the end, I'm going to tell you what's my favorite palette of all time. So if that's interesting to you, let's jump right in. And don't forget to stick to the end. So there's no ranking here. These are in random order. So number 17 is Shroud Cosmetics' Arcana palette. I'm saying Arcana, maybe it's Arcana. I don't know what that means even. If you know, write it in the comments below. So there's two types of fall palettes for me. There's the fall foliage, fall colors palette, which is usually orange, green, variety of green, maybe moving into the neutrals, like brown neutrals. And then there's the grunge fall, and this palette is the grunge fall. It's just a grunginess in this palette is breathtaking. And on top of that, Shroud's quality is fantastic. By the way, I made this eye look with this palette. If you want to see this eye look, I have a video about how I made it with this palette that I'm going to link here if available. And then number 16 is another grunge fall palette. Actually, I think most of what I have is grunge fall just because I love grunge fall. And that is Nocturnal palette by Glaminatrix. This palette is just absolute beauty, and the quality is great. The pigmentation is fantastic. Shimmers are so buttery. It's a very interesting color story, and it's a very high quality palette to use. If you could get your hands on it, I know they still bring it back. I highly recommend it if these are your colors. I also have videos where I've used this palette for making eye looks. I'm going to tag them as well, but highly recommend this, number 16. Next palette is actually a combination of grunge versus actual fall palette, and that is Nomad palette by Juvia's Place. As you can see, these are definitely fall colors in one look. On top of that, it also has the grungy element, and you can definitely make grungy eye looks with it. Add to that the quality and the pigmentation of Juvia's Place, and that makes this palette a favorite. Our next palette, frankly, I don't know if this is available. This is a palette. This is Venus 2 by Lime Crime. I purchased this palette from TJ Maxx on sale for like $5 or $6, and in fact the price tag is still on it. And I know you can still find this palette here and there. It was absolutely brand new. It hadn't been touched. It even has the thingy in it when I purchased it. Look at the color story. This is an obvious fall grunge. You can both do regular fall colors using these oranges and this yellow, or you can do grunge fall using the other colors in this palette. So it's interestingly a pretty versatile palette for its size. Number 13 came out earlier this year and all of a sudden made this brand super popular. I actually think it was the first release of its brand, and that is Druid palette by Fantasy Cosmetica. As you can see, it's evidently a combination of regular fall and grunge fall. You can make just regular fall looks using some of the mattes, even some of the shimmers like this one, or you can use some of the multichrome duochromes for a more grungy fall look. Number 12 is an old palette that was very innovative for its time, but it caused a lot of controversy. It might no longer be available from its mother brand, but it should be available from some websites, and that is Subculture from Anastasia of Beverly Hills. Let's look at the inside of this palette. I could not do a fall video without bringing back Subculture. This color story can't be in any other season. This color story is definitely fall, and it's definitely a combination of regular fall and grunge fall. I know Subculture caused a lot of controversy, but it caused no controversy in my life. This is actually one of my favorite palettes, and I think the color story was so new and so different for its time, and I love bringing it out again and using it every fall season. The next palette is actually on sale online, I think for half price, and that is LA Girl's Main Stage Desert Dream palette. This palette is the ultimate grunge for me. The shimmers in the lower row are so nice and so divine. They totally make an impact on the eye look, and the green and the very vibrant colors totally pack a punch. Super fall grunge for me. I love using this palette. If you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. The next palette I'm going to talk about also came out this year. I don't know if it's going to come back. I know it's not available at the moment, but it's possible that this brand brings it back. So I figured I should talk about it also because some of you might have this palette in your collection and might want to bring it out and start using it in the fall. And that is Follow Your Dreams palette by Saints, Angels, and Sinners in collaboration with Smink. And this is the inside of the palette. Again, another fall grunge palette. Just the combination of orange, this brown, the burgundies, that brown or creamy color, yellow, as well as the greens by themselves make it a super fall grunge. Also this color, oh, this is such a beautiful palette, and the quality is just phenomenal. I know this might not be available at the moment, and maybe she doesn't bring it back anymore, but if for any reason you could get your hands on it, and or if she brings it back, I highly recommend it. Friends, our next palette is another grungy fall palette, and that is Blend Bunny's Search palette. This is the color story of the inside. And look at the level of the grunge. Although this palette doesn't even really have an orange Halloween color, that's the time of the year that this palette reminds me of. So yeah, this is such a grungy, beautiful fall palette. Now, our number 8 is going to be a regular fall palette, and that is Classical Paradise by Ace Beauté. This palette is an absolute fall color story. Just look at it. For some odd reason, every time I look at this palette, the only thing I can think about is Fall Harvest, which is why I bought this palette and another one of their 12 pans only because I really wanted this palette and I could get a discount if I bought 2. But the reason is because this is such a beautiful color story and it's such a fall harvest look, and I could not put it in any other season. Okay, friends, let's talk about number 7. We have another fall grunge, and that is Donna Fall from It's Belle Cosmetics. I mean, of course, if you have fall in the name, you're a fall palette, right? And look at the color story. This level of grunge is totally spooky fall. I have to say, I haven't really used this palette yet. I recently received it and I can't wait to jump into this palette and put it all over my eyelids and make as many eye looks as I can with it, because this palette is 100% fall. The next palette I'm going to talk about is From Miami to Bahamas from Cara Beauty. Look at the inside of this palette. This is an absolute regular fall palette. Every time I open this palette, I think, oh, this is a palette I should reserve and use in the fall. So I'm so excited that fall is here right now, and I've brought out this palette so that I can use it. Friends, the next palette I'm going to talk about, unfortunately, I don't think is available anymore. Although this brand keeps bringing new palettes here and there, so maybe they bring something comparable this year. And that is the Wilderness palette by Beauty Bay. This palette was released last fall, and look at the color story. This palette is just such a gorgeous fall palette with all the greens and all the orange fall foliage reds. This palette is sort of the ultimate fall color story. I'm so excited. I'm looking at it and I really want to dabble my fingers into it and make an eye look right now. So beautiful. Friends, we have 4 palettes to go. Number 4 is BH Cosmetics' Avocado Toast palette. This palette came out last year, I believe, or the year before. I think there are still locations where you can purchase this palette. I know until very recently it was carried on Beauty Bay and also BH Cosmetics' website as well. Separate from that, I've found it multiple times, brand new and completely untouched, at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. But look at the color story. The greens and the browns and all these different colors that kind of make up the fall foliage totally make a colorful fall palette. Even the shimmers are completely fall. These shimmers, these olivey green shimmers, as well as these 2 greens, as well as even the lime green. Such a beautiful fall palette. Highly recommend this palette for quality and color story if you can get your hands on it. And our number 3 is a palette that came out, I think, earlier this year from this Swedish indie brand, and that is Dancing in the Sky by Gloss Gods. This is what this palette looks like from the inside. I don't know if you can see all the shifts, but this color story with the very sort of a grungy but yet minty green is a different take on a fall color story. This palette has a couple of multichromes that are absolutely brilliant, including this one, which is, I think you can see it has a brown shift, and this one, which I think you can see has a lime green shift. But if I look at it from this angle, I see a very dark green, similarly with this one. Super brilliant palette. To me, this is an absolute fall color story, and I love combining this, since it's all shimmer, with grungy mattes similar to the ones either in the Wilderness palette or in Surge palette from Blend Bunny, and making a super grungy fall eye look. Folks, I highly recommend these palettes by Gloss Gods if you can get your hands on them. Do not sleep on them. I also should have a video up with this palette somewhere on my channel. I will tag it here. I should have a video with a lot of these palettes. If some of them are not available, I'm gonna keep tagging them in the appropriate place as they become available, so stay tuned for that. Our second palette is a little bit of cheating, because one of the criteria that I use is that I try not to repeat a brand, so I pick just 1 palette per brand. But I'll explain to you why this is not really cheating, and that is this small palette by Norvina. I think the name of the palette is Mini Pro Pigment Palette Volume 2, and you know, it is the Norvina brand. It's not really ABH, so then we're all good. The color story of this palette is totally fall. Look at this. This is an absolute fall palette. This can't be any other season. And it's such a beautiful and compact, regular fall color story that every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, when the fall comes, I'm going to use this palette more often. And friends, we come to last but not least, my favorite palette of all times. Unfortunately, this palette is no longer available. And that is so sad, because this is the best palette this brand ever released, and they should really consider bringing it back. I know there's enough people out there who really want this palette to come back, and that is Good Sport by ColourPop. Yes, folks, this is my favorite palette of all times. This palette came out in fall, I think September of 2018. And back then, folks, nobody was doing colors like this. This was a super out there color story. Like nobody was doing these kind of grunge, these kind of colors. And honestly, it's even relevant and applicable today. So even for today, this is pretty innovative. I would have loved to be able to say if you could get your hands on this palette, but I know ColourPop does not have it available. So if you could get your hands on the palette, it would probably be an old and a second-hand palette. So I'm not going to recommend that. But if you could dupe this palette, definitely I recommend you doing that. This is a lovely color story. In fact, write to me if you're curious for me to dupe this palette, because maybe I can dupe it for you with the singles that I have available. In fact, one thing that I would contemplate doing was to bring this palette and kind of this color story to 2022 and maybe try to grunge it up with some of the multichromes or colorful and shifty duochromes that I have available in the singles that I own. That actually sounds like an intriguing idea. Write to me down below if that is something you would be interested to watch, because if there is enough interest, I would definitely make a video about it. Okay, friends, I'm inserting myself from a little bit later in the same day. As you can see, I'm wearing the same thing and the makeup's the same, because I was editing the video and I realized that I forgot a very, very important super grungy of the grunge palettes, which I recently reviewed in this channel, and that is Serenity by Cosmic Brushes. Folks, how did I forget this palette? I don't even know. This is the ultimate fall palette. Honestly, I even thought to myself, can I skip this palette? I can't skip this palette. This is the ultimate fall grunge, and it just came out. Like, there's no excuse for me to have forgotten this palette. So apologies, there wasn't 17 palette, there was actually 18 palette. I'm gonna call it 17 plus 1. But yes, this is yet another fall grunge. Absolute gorgeous palette. I'm gonna link the video where I reviewed this palette. I highly recommend you watching that video. This is a fantastic palette. Now let's go back to the other video. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks so much for sticking around with me. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to this channel for more content like this. Also write down below for me, what is your favorite fall palette? Thanks again, folks. I love you all, and until next time. Bye.